Welcome to another session of My First Job. The cliche is that fewer and fewer people are reading these days. But what about writers? And where does the fount of inspiration come from? Today's journey is about Andaleeb Wajid, who's never at a loss for words. Most of us seem to think that we have one book in our lifetime, and she's already written 40 of them, and there are many more on the way. So, what is it that drives Andaleeb's inspiration and keeps those books coming? We have a highly talented writer with a huge fan base and someone whose career journey we will be exploring in detail. Let me welcome Andaleeb to the show. Hi, Andaleeb.
Hi, Venu.
So
Thank you for
good,
having me here.
so good to have you on the show. And it's wonderful to see that in a world where people say that not too many people are reading anymore, you continue to write away and attract a whole new legend of fans and introduce so many more people into writing.
Thank you.
So
Thank you
tell
so
me,
much.
what is a typical writing day like?
I treat my writing like a job, not like a hobby. So, I take it very seriously in that I sit down at my desk at, say, in the morning after I finish my breakfast or whatever at 9:30, 10. I don't write continuously. I try and finish a chapter or whatever I'm working on right now. Then I take a break and I have other things also. So I do a bit of freelance writing on the side, some proofreading, a sort of other bread and butter job sort of thing. So I devote some time to that. But I have like a very structured plan sort of thing, which I try to follow, and sometimes it's I'm not successful because of various things, stuff in the family happening, or generally, sometimes I'm just tired of writing, so I allow myself to take a break. I am my own boss and a very strict boss at that.
Okay.
I think, being writing so many books and publishing them has been made possible because of my commitment and being very strict with myself. So
Otherwise, it just wouldn't be possible. I mean, people
yeah,
talk of discipline, but unless you follow it, and like you
yeah,
said, structure, discipline, and sitting down every day and getting something out is one of the keys to getting this
yes.
going.
It's, people think that writing has this very ephemeral air about it, and that it's something very
Yeah,
arty, and you need to have this muse and all that stuff. And
right.
I feel like, I mean, it's my job. So I sit down, whether there is any muse or not sitting by my side, I don't know. So I just sit down and I write. And
You
I try to, sorry.
you summon the muse instead of the
I
muse.
don't know. I don't know. So I just sit down and write, and I try to focus on getting this story forward. So especially since I do quite a bit of self-publishing, and I have to decide my own, my publishing schedule every year,
Right.
and all those things. So writing for me is not just about writing a book. For me, I have to take into factors like, putting it out there, whether this is going to be self-published, whether I'm going to approach a publisher. um, so making those decisions, there's a lot of conscious work that goes into being a writer today, for me at least.
Right.
I don't say this is the same for everyone, and
Yeah.
like you said, everyone has a book in them, and I think that's very true. But at the same time, I've kind of feel like I've gone beyond that thing where writing is not just my career, it's my job. It's somehow it pays my bills. So this is all I've ever wanted. I just wanted to,
Yes.
have a job where I can write stories. So
And it's
I feel lucky
wonderful
and
to hear
privileged.
a writer say that it pays the bills because that is the other
No,
part
I
of it.
wouldn't say, it pays all the bills. I would say,
But at
to
least,
a certain
yeah,
extent, because there are certain privileges that, I do have.
yeah,
So so I never advise people to take writing as a full-time job, unless they have certain things that, that they're not, um, that doesn't affect them, things like rent and bills and all that. So if a lot of those things are taken care of, then you can, consider writing as a full-time job. And having said
Yeah.
that, I have other things also, like, like I said, I do a lot of other freelancing stuff on the side.
Okay.
So writing pays the bills, but not to the
Not
extent that
yeah.
I would like it to.
But one of the things I saw, social media session that you had done, where you said you came from a family of storytellers,
Yes.
and I thought that that was a beautiful way of getting the inspiration going early on. So can you take us through some of those early bits and then get down to
So, my father was a sort of very instinctive storyteller, So he was an avid reader, and my mother is also a reader. She used to read, now she's stopped. So they used to read a lot of books, and I think, so when my brother and I were small, there was no 24-hour access to entertainment like how it is today, So we would
yeah,
trouble him sometimes. I think especially because we were not in Bangalore, we had traveled to Kerala for his Ayurvedic treatment for something. So especially there, we were really bored, in the evenings. So he would sit down and tell us these stories, which he claimed was from this big book, which I had never seen in our house, So he kept saying it's from this big book and everything. So, and each day, so he would stop like at a cliffhanger, and he would say enough for today. So tomorrow, we would wait till that time when he would sit and continue the story. And later I got to know that there was no such book. He was making it on the go, So
yeah,
so I think, my brother does that with his kids now. So he tells stories like that. He makes it up on the fly. And I think, like even my nani, my maternal grandmother, also used to tell stories. She would recount stories that she'd read. She was also an avid reader. She would read all these Urdu stories and, books and novels. And so she would sit down and tell us something that she remembered. So I think that tradition of listening to a story and, listening to something and imagining it happening somewhere in your mind, because that's the thing about listening to a story, is something that takes a little bit of effort for the listener also, to
yes.
stay in one place and to not let your mind wander. So I think those things helped me in ways that I didn't really imagine.
Yeah,
So
and I think when you said that your father was an instinctive storyteller about stopping at the points where he knew he'd come back the next day,
yes,
it's one of those well-known sort of
marketing,
strategies that
yes.
everything from serials to
Yes,
the earliest serialized novels that used to appear in magazines. You
yes.
didn't have subscriptions, but you
No.
had this draw where the
Yeah.
next week would have the next installment.
Yes.
And I think a lot of wonderful writers, especially in the vernacular, came
Hmm.
out because of that constant draw that people had from,
Yes.
whether it
Yes.
is Ponniyin Selvan or, in Kerala, you had a whole lot of writers who did that. That was almost like a selling strategy.
Yes.
But
Yes.
so where did your actual experiments with writing begin?
So I had this, typical angsty teenage growing up, where I was not sure of what I wanted to do. And also for me, um, so I'm talking about, say, 25 years ago, no, more than that. So around 28 years ago, maybe. So life was very different in so many ways, for a young Muslim teenager who's a girl. So there were certain expectations from the family about, getting married and having that. And I was like, I want to do something, but I didn't know what also. So I didn't, so, I went along with, whatever when I was studying, and I got married when I was 19. And before that, I was writing, and I was still, so writing was a sort of way for me to just express all this angst inside, I mean, today there are so many venues for that. For me, writing was the only way I could express that angst. And I kind of started writing fiction after I got married. And, so I had to finish college after my marriage. And the year after that, when I was expecting my son, I was extremely bored, So I just sat and I started writing some short stories for children, and I sent it out. And I forgot about it because after my son was born, we were running between hospitals. He was not well for a while. So I forgot about it, and then one of the stories got published, and seeing my name. So I had been published in the paper before this, but those were like very small instances, and I wasn't really sure I could do anything with that, because anyone can get an article published in the newspaper, but it doesn't really mean anything. And I started writing these short stories for a children's supplement called Open Sesame, and that kind of,
Okay.
I would say, gave me this steady impetus to keep writing and sending because they kept publishing. So that, and then after that, I moved to writing fiction for older people, and I've had a really fair share of my struggles. In a sense, getting people to notice my writing was not easy 15 years ago. So, four of my short stories were in a collection, I think, which Deepa is also, her stories were also in that collection. That's how we got to know each
Right.
other. So it's called
Right.
Curtains. And it's been, so after that, I wrote a novel, and I didn't know anything about writing a novel. I didn't know how to plot. I didn't know what a plot was. As in, I vaguely knew it, but I didn't know how to apply that knowledge while I was writing. And characterization, things which you learn as you keep reading and writing. So I was reading a lot. I was reading a lot of books, and a lot of Indian books, actually, books by Indian authors.
Okay.
Back in the early 2000s, we didn't have, Indian writing was not what it is today. You just had
Right.
Chitra Banerjee, you had Shashi Deshpande and Jhumpa Lahiri. So I read all their books. I even, read even the obscure ones. I used to look for them because I felt that I couldn't write a story. I had to write a story that I could relate to,
Okay.
and as an Indian woman, I wanted to be able to relate to the stories I write. And for me to be able to do that in a space where you didn't really see that many Indian women, like, featured, or even Indians, I would say, unless they were
Yeah.
NRIs, like in Jhumpa Lahiri's books, most of them were NRIs. So
Right.
it took some time and, some help from a few very good mentors. And I was writing. I wrote my first novel, and I sent it out to a lot of publishers. I had to physically take printouts and, courier it to them, and I hardly heard from them. Some refused. Some, like, if I had emailed them, some had just rejected outright. There were a lot of problems with that book. I'm sure, So, but I felt like I wish someone would take the time, to invest the time to make that book better, to help me, in that. But that didn't happen, unfortunately, because I don't blame the publishers. There are a lot of people who want to be writers, and
Right.
even though considerably less back then, but as compared to today everyone wants to be a writer. No one wants to actually write anything. They want to be a writer. They want to have written something. And I
Yeah.
think everyone is more interested in the publishing aspect, because that's where the perceived glamour is there now. Because writing
Yes.
is the most unglamorous job, is one of the most unglamorous jobs in the art sphere, at least. You get up and you may not have showered or anything. You'll sit and write, and no one knows what you were looking like when you were writing a really good scene. And that's like, you get away with it. That's
Yeah.
the life of a writer. But when you're publishing, it's you putting your face out in front of the world, and everyone sees you. They have this impression of you, and I think that's the sort of impression that people have. So they see only that aspect. People from the outside see the last part where, we finally,
Yes.
the writer has finished the book and everything, and it's looking great, and the writer is looking great, and so they sit on a stage with some celebrity and launch the book. They don't see all the hard work that has gone behind that, to reach that
Yeah.
stage.
Yeah.
So it took me a lot of time to find a publisher, and that also was not a very good publisher. They were not very good. My first book came out with them, and then I subsequently published my second and third with Rupa. So I kind of had this, I mean, I shouldn't feel foolish about it, but, you know, back, say, 14, 15 years ago when I started writing and, trying to get published. I think everyone has that dream. You write one book and it gets published and you're like famous and everyone knows you. And obviously that doesn't happen right away. And
Yeah.
then it doesn't happen even after the second, third book. And after that, you kind of realize, okay, that's not going to happen. I'm going to write because I love writing. And it's literally one of the only things that I can properly do. So I
Right.
might as well do it. So I wrote and I published by 20. So in 2014, I decided I'm going to take a 1 year break from writing because by then I had finished writing 10 books and only some five had been published. So that
You'd
itself,
already written 10 by that time.
yeah, I had, and only
Wow.
four or five had been
Okay.
published. And I was
Okay.
very disheartened with the publishing world. I said, I can't just keep writing and wait for this to be picked up. And I don't even know if it's going to be picked up. I don't even know if anyone's going to publish it. What's the point of me accumulating all these books like this? And
Right.
self publishing was not something I was comfortable with back then. I didn't really understand how it worked. And so I took a break from writing. And that year, I had four books come out. So
Okay.
more than this biryani and a trilogy, which I had a young adult trilogy called Tamanna Trilogy. So four books came out, and I was waiting for December 31st because I told myself. So if I take myself, I'm a very strict boss. So if I give myself break, I'm very strict about that also. No, you're not writing before
Not very.
2015. So Jan
Okay.
1st, 2015, I just started so I was like, I can't wait. And I told myself, I am never doing this again. This 1 year break was a very stupid idea because I think, in a way, writing is a sort of addiction also for me. It kind of, so I had deprived myself of that. So, yeah, it's a bit complicated trying to explain how writing is,
No, but I
it's
think you
also
have
not
done this. Yeah. No, just to interject, I think when you said you took that break,
a,
you actually stopped doing what you really like doing. It was almost like somebody who loves food saying that, no, I'm going to go on a, a crash diet for
yes,
the next 1 year
yes,
and
yeah.
intentionally starve yourself to the point where you're probably bursting with ideas when you come back to it all over
Yeah,
again.
yeah. No, but that was like I told myself that I'm never doing this again. At the most, I'll
Okay.
take a break for maybe 1 or 2 weeks or a month, but that's it. Never
Okay.
a year, because I don't think I can last for that long without writing. So,
Right.
writing has a lot of psychological, aspects to me for me. So for me, it
Right.
kind of is. I feel very good about myself when I'm writing. It's a sort of, I think it's a lot to do with whatever the psychologists must be calling dopamine or and all that. It feels good when I'm writing.
Yeah.
So I'm like, why should I deprive myself of that intentionally?
Absolutely. Now, when you're writing, when you're actually writing, are you, uh, do you go ahead and write, let's say, 1,000 words, 2,000 words, and then stop to review it? Or is it that you do this you say that, okay, I think I'm getting to a point where I'm fine, but I also know that certain days I'm very good at what I seem to be doing. Though in retrospect, sometimes what you think is bad when you read 4 days later may actually be good, and vice versa.
Yeah.
I'm not sure.
No, I mean, it's not possible to take leave from a job just because you don't feel like it. So I don't, I sit down and if not specifically writing, then something, see, writing for me means there are so many things. I have all these notebooks where I make notes. So if I don't feel like doing the actual writing, I sit and make notes, which is mostly me doing a lot of stream of consciousness scribbling, trying to get things. So in that way, when I get back to the writing, the words flow easily. So I have notebooks with me, which I kind of carry with me wherever I'm going. And these are my so I use them uh, to jot down my thoughts about that particular story. And I now, so I am obsessed with notebooks. So now I have like, this is this notebook is just for this book, for this novel or this series, so I'm not going to mix it up. So for that way, I have a lot more notebooks that way, So,
Okay.
um, so I kind of, I don't feel like, so when I sit down to write, it's not about the word count. The word count is something that I do subconsciously look at when today, okay, so I've written this much. But for me, it's more like, if I'm able to finish a chapter. So the chapter could be like, say, 900 words, 1,500 words, 2,000 words if I'm in the mood for it. And if it's like going really well, But sometimes you have to physically stop because, it physically hurts to write beyond a point. So I
Right.
know it's taken a lot of experimenting with my own, posture and my arm and everything. So I kind of know that I can't do beyond a certain point. And my
Right.
body kind of tells me that it's time to stop. Because sometimes when I start typing, when I'm very tired, I start making a lot of typos. I start typing a lot. It makes no sense to anyone, not even me. So I know that, okay, this is my brain is also not working. My hands are also not working. It's time to take a break, So I
Okay.
feel like I have it good in the sense that, okay, I give myself this much time to write and more or less finish it. So,
Okay. So when it comes to, let's say, your journey as a writer now, you've been writing for 14 years and you know exactly, is there a sense of what is the internal change? Is
hmm,
it possible to figure that out, or is it something that you don't really consciously spend too much? The reason I'm saying is that in a job with more experience, there are certain aspects of the job that get easier. There are certain parts of it which get very monotonous as well, and there are things that keep you going because of some little spark that came out from somewhere. Like you said, you probably need a break to come back to it to realize how much you like writing and each one of these things. So when you're thinking of your characters, like you said, you make notes
yeah.
and then you're thinking about these characters and now you're almost assigning one notebook to each the plot points and then saying, okay, this is how it comes, which is, I think, a much more organized way of feeding that inspiration, because then becomes
Yeah.
like, okay, I know that this particular thing, so you open that and
Yes.
certain connections happen,
It's
and
very
then you say, okay,
tangible
this will happen.
and it's not something that's just in my mind, when I put it down
Yeah.
on paper. And of course, my mind, I'm very liable to forget something that I might have thought of. So when I look back, certain things pop up at me. And as for what you asked about the evolution over the years, I think so. My writing has definitely become faster in the sense I do
Okay.
write very fast. I physically type also very fast, so I think that kind of also helps. So that, and I think I I would say being able to see the end of the book much before. Like earlier, it was not easy for me to see the end of the book, and I would have a vague idea of how it's going to end. If it's a romance, it's obviously going to be a happily ever after sort of thing.
Yeah.
But you have to reach that point. You have to create the conflict, a believable conflict, and then you have to make sure that reasons for that conflict are explained, and then that conflict goes away, and then the protagonists can finally be united or whatever. And I think so for me earlier this used to be a problem in that it used to take me a lot of time to figure that out.
Okay.
It would be I would go around in circles, but now I feel it's faster. I kind of have an idea of how to make things happen, and what to do. I think the technique has improved. The writing is much more, I would say, contemporary, I think. So as I've grown older, I feel like I've started writing younger. So I don't know. So
That's
I
great.
think when I was
And that's
younger,
one
I
place
was
where you can
yes,
grow much younger over the
yes,
years.
yes. Because when I was younger, I was writing about people who are, say, my age. And I was very disconnected from all of it, because I was a stay at home mother and I didn't know the world outside. I didn't really, I did two jobs. I did a couple of jobs. There was one job, but I had to go in twice a week. So that kind of really helped expand my worldview, and for me all the jobs were all like fodder for my books. So all the jobs and all the people and all the politics and everything, so I was like, you wait, it's going to show up in some book somewhere.
It's going to appear in a
So
book sometime.
yeah, but I think so so it was like the I was very disconnected from the world as such, apart from whatever I saw on TV and all that, and or read on the internet, and I was not happy about that. In the sense, I felt like, first of all, I've lived a very limiting life. I can't keep writing stories about just like about stories about people like me, because that's not the point. If I am a writer, I should be able to live all these multiple lives. That's one of the advantages of being a writer. And I think as I've grown older, and I've stepped out a lot more and observed people, I have younger friends, I see them, I have older friends, I have younger friends. So I think that expanding my worldview has helped. And I think now that I'm older, I'm able to write about younger people. Like most of my heroines are in their 20s. When I was in my 20s, I was living a very different life. I was a mother of two kids before 30. So and these are girls who are nothing like that. So it kind of, I feel very happy about having this alter ego sort of thing. So I think that's been my evolution.
Okay, so how do you shift gears when it comes to, are you writing only one book at a time, or you or are you saying that today let me write romance, tomorrow let me do horror, and then
No,
let's see
I
how things
don't do that. I don't do that because what happens is when I'm writing, you need to get that voice of the character right. I don't want to mix that up. What I do is I do end up, say, starting multiple projects, and then I kind of let whichever it is take precedence. The one that I feel more pulled towards. So currently, like, I would have three projects open in my laptop. One of them, like two of them, might be romance, one might be thriller. I try not to mix genres when I'm writing. Um, sometimes it helps, because sometimes I do get very bogged down by, if I'm writing romance and romance at the time, end of it, I'm so fed up. I'm like, I'm going to convert this into a thriller. I'm going to make them kill each other or something. So so I don't. So to prevent that from happening, I kind of try to take, like see which kind of pulls me in. So sometimes what happens is I might, so I was doing that right now also. I was working on two books at the same time, and one book has suddenly gone on to 28,000 words, the other one is still in the early, like, 12,000 words. So I'm like, okay, I'll finish this one first and then come back to this.
right?
But I've kind of brought it up to that point, so it's not like completely starting afresh. So I don't tell myself that let me finish this and then start. So if I feel like I need to start, I just start, and then I make notes so that I can come back to it. So I'm also a very instinctive writer in that, but I also plan things. So if I'm
Right.
writing about something, I make plans, extensive plans about what's going to happen in the book. So
As a reader, what kind of books do you like reading?
I like reading crime fiction. I enjoy romance. I really like police procedurals and mysteries, and especially I'm not that much of a fan of true crime, but I like crime fiction and thrillers and those sort of things. I like. My favorite, all time favorite. But I also enjoy, the rom-coms and the chick lit novels and something that's, frothy. Not a very big fan of literary fiction because, I feel like I don't have the mental energy and the time that it asks from me to sit down and put myself in. Because when you're reading literary fiction, you have to give a bit of yourself also when you're reading it, in the in
Right.
the in the whatever it takes for you to, you're not just consuming it, you are giving a bit of yourself, and sometimes I don't have the bandwidth or the time for that. One thing I don't read at all is nonfiction. So I can't
Okay.
read nonfiction. And I
Okay.
just, my son reads nonfiction. I'm like, is this really my son? How can he read nonfiction? Because I can't read nonfiction at all. But
Okay.
yeah, and I love fantasy, young adult fantasy, lots. So I basically read whatever I can except nonfiction.
Okay. But and about storyteller, are you a storyteller mom as well, like your nanny was and your father was?
Not so much. When my kids were small, maybe I would tell them some scary story to scare them to sleep more than anything else. So, not so much of a storyteller mom. And, they don't have the patience to sit with me, and I don't have the patience with them.
Yeah,
They're all grown up now. Both of them are grown up. So, but with the younger kids, I enjoy, like, reading from a book, and, with my nieces and nephews and all that, I enjoy that. So,
no, but it's an amazing thing as to how, like you said, you write fiction, but you also enjoy reading fiction,
yes,
which
yes, yes.
is, it's not that you're satiated and then you say, okay, I want to go back to something that is not what I do on a daily
No,
basis.
so a lot of writers, especially, I come across a lot of writers who don't read much, so
Hmm.
they want to write, but they don't want to read. So I find that very strange, because it's like
Yeah,
one of the basic tools to be a writer is to read. So if you don't read, what's going to happen is that you're going to get an idea, and you're going to be so like amazed. I have the best idea in the world. But if you don't read, you wouldn't know that, say, Stephen King would have written it like in 1975, or someone else would have written
yeah,
it long ago. So, if you don't read, then you won't know what's out there.
right.
And but just for that, I think that reading for enjoyment is something. Reading
Yeah,
has a lot of goals associated with it today. Reading for enjoyment is not something that's considered very seriously these days. So I mean,
yeah,
people have these reading goals, and they have these bookstagrams where they will put up very aesthetically designed, the photos of a book that they've read. I mean, I love it when they do with my books, but I'm like, I hope
so
that they've read the book also, because some of the covers
it's
are so
almost like
cute.
you're keeping a, yeah, it's like you're keeping accounts of how much you spent and where did you spend it and stuff like that.
So you have a
Yeah,
lot of these bookstagram accounts who are doing great work when it comes to promoting books. But it's become this whole ecosystem, where
yeah,
publishers send books to these Instagrammers, and they will make a beautiful looking post. But I'm like, have you read the book? What did you think? And
yeah,
for me, when I see the reviews on Amazon, especially, everyone wants to know when's the next book coming out. But I'm like, what about this one? What did you like about
yeah,
this one? So especially if it's a series, a connected series, which really does well on Amazon, that's what everyone wants to know. We want to know what's happening to the next couple. When is their story coming out? When are you writing their story? So those are the things. I mean, I'm like, so reading, I feel like, has to a certain extent taken a back seat, in the sense there's so much more competing for it, as compared to before, when we were kids, we just had reading. We didn't have,
right,
we had TV would come at very specific times,
very true.
and after that, there was nothing to watch on TV. So for us, our entertainment was TV. And today, entertainment is not even a question. There's so much, and you don't know what to choose. So if someone actively chooses to read a book, it's amazing, I feel, because they have put aside
Yeah,
temptations from Netflix and everything else to sit with a book. So I think
right.
that's, there are readers
Same,
today,
yeah.
and yeah.
What about different forms of writing, meaning movie scripts and stuff like that? Is that something that you've ever looked at seriously? Are you,
I kind of want to, but at the same time, I think, so I'm a, a huge loner when it comes to writing. I'm not a very
okay?
collaborative person, although I have collaborated with two of my friends, and we've brought out two series together last year and this year. And
Okay.
that's a different deal, because these are my friends, so I can just tell them anything. But I think with writing for movies and all, it's an extremely collaborative effort, and also physically you need to be present. I think, especially in India, you need to be in Bombay, you need to be part of that writer's room. So those are things I don't see myself doing. I mean, if I was, say, 20 years younger, if I was, like, unmarried and didn't have children, so maybe those are things. And if I was from a different, a more open and open and broad-minded community and family, then those are things I could have pursued. But I don't feel like I've missed out on something. So I'm like, it's
Okay.
okay. I'm happy with this. So someone make a movie out of my book and pay me good money, and I'll be more than happy.
More than happy to
Yeah.
see that change now. One of the
Yeah.
things that I've found which is really different, Anthony, between advertising films and, let's say, the real film, is that, or books, is that you have to develop character.
Yeah.
So the character is someone who starts out with a name and a job or whatever it is in a certain situation. And then you expand on that whole thing. You give them characteristics, you give them situations. Advertising relies on stereotypes. So
Mhm.
you've got to make out in the very first, couple of seconds as to where is this family, what is the relationship, and 30 seconds later the story is over. So it's a completely different this thing, which is why probably a lot of advertising uh, filmmakers have not really transitioned to the 2.5 hour format.
But
But
a lot of
you're a
advertising is,
very
huh? Sorry.
but
No, no.
no,
Sorry,
you're a
sorry.
very atypical writer because I think in 3 months, if you finish a book and you think 3 to 4 months you finish a book, that is not the normal rate at which people operate. They,
No,
on
I
an
can
average,
finish a book in 1 month. Okay.
wow.
So 3 months is like, when I'm being very easy with myself and I'm like, okay,
Okay.
it's okay. Aaj nahi to theek hai, tomorrow I will write. Then I take 3 months. If I religiously sit and write every day, then I can easily finish a book in a month, 40 days at the most.
Okay.
No, what you were saying about advertising, but there are a lot of people from the advertising world who are, uh, doing really well as writers. You have
Right.
Anuja Chauhan, Judy also. So,
Right.
so
Yeah. No, I
I think,
meant more
they
about the
come
film
from a
part.
very different. I think their approach to writing is very different. I'm very
Yeah.
fascinated by it. So I'm a very different, like I said, self-taught and instinctive writer. So I find that very fascinating.
And it's like you said, you're self-taught. That is one of the things which I believe is it's almost instinctive because it's
Hmm.
not as if you've got this whole examples at home which you've followed. There was this nice podcast where Nadal Pandey talks about her mother Shivani sending out uh, the serialized novel to Dharmyog. And she
Hmm.
said her mother used to write at the kitchen table and she used to write between meals. And she used to write between, so it's not as if she was able to set up a time. She had to find the time, she had to sit down and write and then do it. Whereas, like you said, for you, writing is something that keeps you inspired. It's something that you need to do because it helps you in so many ways.
No,
So
yeah. Sorry, what was your question?
no, no, no. I think that's the point where I was going to hand over.
Okay. So, see, I feel that, women writers have it very tough. We are handling multiple things which, male writers have no clue about. So, if you're a woman, if you're a mother, if you're a homemaker, whatever, or if you're a career person, then it adds along with all these things. Like, you're a home, you have a family, you have people who depend on you. I mean, I see male writers, posting about how they lock themselves in their room for, say, 6 hours. They came out with this, I finished 3 chapters, 4 chapters, 5 chapters. In my head, you won't believe the sort of galis I will give that man, So, because, you had someone cook for you, you had someone take care of the house, you had someone, whether you have kids or not, someone probably brought you food and gave it to you.
Right.
So you had a wife. I mean, I think, if all writers had, say, someone who would do all this for them, then everyone would be very productive. you know. So I find it very, so I think, women especially, whatever they do, however they do, I am amazed, because each one of us has different issues in our houses, and for each of us it's a huge thing. It could be a sick parent or a sick in-law or someone, and you have to do that and do your writing along with that. So your priorities tend to get watered down as a result. So in my case, I would say, because it, I don't tell people, look at me, I'm so focused, I'm so disciplined, if I can do it, you can do it. I don't think everyone can do it, because
Yeah.
you need to have that certain, I would say, a sort of ecosystem around you that enables you to write. I had that. I mean, when my mother-in-law was alive, she would take care of the house for me. Until 2 years ago, everything was her domain. So I would just go. She would tell me, go do and write. So when you have someone who takes care of that, and
Yeah.
who and my kids are grown up. So for me, I don't have. I mean, but I have been writing from the time when they were climbing all over me. So I've faced that also. They're just grown up now, so thankfully I don't have to deal with that. So I don't tell people that I can do it, you should do it, because each one of us, especially women, have so many different, problems, or whatever it is, where that writing takes a backseat. Unfortunately, I feel that if we had someone who enabled us to write, so many women would write so many wonderful books. That's the sad
Yeah.
reality of our
That's the
times. I'm
sad part.
sorry I ranted about this, but this is a major
No.
rant for me. I feel very strongly about this, especially when I see male writers posting about their accomplishments, and I'm like, very few of them, I think, are aware of the sacrifice that goes into, maybe their wife
Yeah.
would have, hard work that she would have done, or so all that. So I just feel very strongly about it. So
No,
I just
and
had to
I
put that in.
100% agree, Andaleeb. Everything that you say is 10% true. Men, by simply because of their gender advantage,
Yeah,
tend to have so much more going for them
yeah,
because
yeah,
of this. Now, the strange part is that they don't think it's an advantage
yeah,
because they
yeah,
never have seen the other side.
yeah,
Because as far as they're concerned, that was the way they grew up. So
yes.
it was not as if things are any different after they get married. So that, I think, is one of the other aspects which never comes into the picture.
Yeah. So behind whatever the writing that happens, so much has gone behind all that, that it's very hard for someone who is not a writer to understand the sort of things that you've had to go through to reach there.
Right.
I mean, I'm not saying all women are suffering. To a certain extent, there are some people who can afford to have help, who can afford to have people taking care of the bills and all that stuff. So it's not like, it's not like a one size fits all. But overall, women have to struggle harder. And if like a man says he locks himself in his room for 6 hours, if a woman was to do that, the house would be burnt down by the time she comes out. So there won't be any house left. So it's very sad, that women have to
I,
do
I
this.
love your honesty, Anjali, because these are the things you must find it a little strange that we've not discussed your books at all. We've spent
No, I'm okay.
okay.
So
So, okay, just to, I think we need to concentrate a little bit on, I'd like to understand from your point of view, since you have so many books, is there a book that you really enjoyed writing or something that after you've written, after all these years, you come back to and then say that, yeah, this is something where I think I kind of got close to what I was looking for.
so when I don't know how to explain this to you, but when I am writing, I really feel like I am not myself. Okay. I
Okay.
really feel like there is some external thing. I don't want to sound like, superstitious or something, but
Good.
only because when I go back and read it, I'm like, oh my God, did I write this? Whether it's
Okay.
good or bad, I'm like, I can't believe that I was able to put that sentence together in that way, because I
Okay.
don't have any memory of, creating that. So I don't feel. I mean, I've enjoyed writing a lot of books over the years, and it's very hard to pick one because each year something new I'm bringing out. So something is a new favorite. So I've just signed a deal with a publisher with Penguin actually for a young adult novel that's due this late this year, I think. And that's one book which I really enjoyed writing. And I, because I think, I wrote about a very spunky young Muslim girl who goes
Okay.
out and, gets what she wants. And, given the situation in which we are, writing about a girl like that itself is a form of rebellion, because people
Right.
expect,
Very true.
they expect your heroines to be a certain way, especially when me being an Indian Muslim woman writer, there's so many adjectives before
Yes.
writer for me,
Yes. Yes.
my heroines especially, people have this, people make a lot of assumptions everywhere. So my recently released Jasmine Villa series, which is very interesting. What happened is I self-published this series in 2019, and Westland acquired it last year. And this year in February, they brought out all three books as paperbacks and ebooks, and they've
Okay.
done a brilliant job with the covers, with the marketing. It looks lovely. And because of that, so what happened is that in the past, so I started self-publishing in 2019. And since then, I have published quite a few books because there is no publishing schedule. Whatever it is,
Hmm.
I decide. I can publish three books today if I want. If I have three books, I can publish them all together. So I am the
Okay.
one who makes all the rules. So my self-publishing crowd, the people, the readers, were used to seeing all this. But the people who hadn't read so many of my ebooks, because as people have certain problems with reading ebooks and they don't want to read on a Kindle and they just have this aversion to it for some reason.
Yeah.
So for them who, they picked up those books now and they are like, this is amazing. We had no idea. Um, we have no idea how like that you were writing so well about all this. So I'm like, if you'd read my self-published books, you would have seen my heroines have evolved from what they were when I was writing and publishing with publishers to when I'm self-publishing, where I don't have to answer anyone. So I think it's kind of opened their eyes. So I would say, the recent this Jasmine Villa trilogy, the heroines are very normal Indian Muslim girls who have these, the very relatable issues facing them, stuff to do with marriage, and they fall in love and all those sort of things. So I mean, when I find it very hard to specifically pinpoint, which book was more enjoyable because
No, but
some of
that's
the
fine.
books were actually, very difficult to write. Some of them take time, especially the horror ones take a lot of time to write because I always feel that horror is very subjective. See, romance is a very universal emotion. Everyone more or less feels the same way. They understand when you read about two people having chemistry or gazes meeting or whatever. You understand it. Because this is relatable in a way. But horror is very subjective in that what scares me might not scare you. So for me,
Right.
it takes a lot of time to see whether this really works, whether it's coming out across as scary or whether it's just cheesy. Which range of horror does this fit into? So I find it very fascinating and very tough to write also. So
So, what
yeah.
is the deal with how does it work in self publishing? You actually do most of the work yourself, or is it handed out to this thing? How does that work?
So when you're self-publishing, you're the publisher, you're the editor, you're the cover designer. If so, if you want it, you don't need anyone. But what we like to do is we do hire people to do the cover for us. Editing, more or less, we do each other's editing if we are working with friends.
Okay.
But mostly it's our own self edits. As for formatting, it's all been made very easy. Technology has made it very easy,
It
So you
doesn't
just
take much.
upload a Word document to a certain say software, and it'll take care of it. It'll create the ebook for you. You just have to upload it on the Amazon backend. So you end up doing all the work, and you end up taking all the money. So yeah.
No, that part is good. It's a no the thing that I find most interesting, Anjali, is, you know, through whatever you've told me, is that you sat and listened, you absorbed in childhood, then you made your first little forays, and then figured out that okay, this works, this doesn't work, and then you persisted
Yes,
in
persistent.
the face of whether it was discouragement, whether it was the family situation, or whether it was whatever it is, you persisted, and you managed to go through so many genres and experimented with that. Because I think the other part is that most writers tend to stick to whatever they find is successful and then say, okay, my audience will read this, this is what. You're a writer who explores new audiences apart from new subjects,
Yeah.
which is refreshing. So, and the fact that you've taken to self-publishing so easily, because that's another thing where people say no, but then it almost is, it like it goes into character with whatever you've done. That is, you're willing to experiment, you're willing to take things forward, which is, I think, the other part of this whole thing, which is not very evident to people on the outside. Is that a summation, or is it you disagree with parts of that?
No, no, no. I think more or less it's right. It's correct. Self-publishing also is not. I think self-publishing came to me at a time where I wanted to write and not be stopped by a publisher for telling me that you're
Okay.
writing too much and we can't publish
Right.
all of this, because they have their own constraints. No one can publish so much. And I was looking for a way where I could bring out my books and I could put them out to the world. And uh, publishing, traditional publishing, takes a very long time. It takes a year to a year and a half from the time you sign the contract. But getting to the contract stage itself is another 6 months in the works, because getting a publisher interested in your work, in them finally asking for the full manuscript, them trying, if they like it, then they try to convince their sales and marketing team that this book will sell. And and then they send the contract and then you sign it, and then after that, a year and a half. So I am like, I don't have the patience for this. I mean, I will publish with publishers because um, there is a lot of stigma associated with self-publishing in India, today especially, because the idea is that people assume that because you probably didn't get a publisher, you self-published. That's the
Right.
basic assumption. So when I started self-publishing, people were like, "But you've been published with Penguin, with Bloomsbury. Why are you self-publishing?" I said, "Because I want to publish and I want to keep writing. I don't want a publisher to stop me." So striking that balance has not been easy, but I'm trying, because I do still want. So that the problem is, I was initially worried that if I self-publish so much, will this affect how a publisher looks at me, how they perceive me? Because for them, if they bring out one book a year, it's more than enough, you know.
Yeah.
And here is this person bringing out, say, 5, 6 books a year. So how am I going to, focus on the marketing for their book? Will I be able to focus my energies on marketing their book? So so all those things were running through my head. And so even this year, when Westland brought out Jason Villa in February, I put a pause on my self-publishing. I said it's time I devote some of it, because they have invested a lot and they are doing a great job in terms of marketing. So I shouldn't water it down by bringing out my own books, which might compete for it.
Okay.
So those are certain things that I have to keep in mind. So now my next book will be out only in July. So I'm currently writing it. I felt that's like a big enough gap from February, but I don't know. I didn't ask them. So I'm like, I don't want to ask anyone. I don't want anyone's permission, but I
This
think they
is
should be
the
okay with it.
And this is the other aspect, because you've so fluidly moved into this whole aspect of what it takes into marketing a book, and how the cover design is important,
Yes.
and how it sort of gets the core of what the book is all about. because you have that momentary, most of the time in a bookshop earlier, okay, you see the front, otherwise you see only a spine, and these days when you're scrolling you just see a set of covers, you're not really
Yeah.
seeing much more. So the world has changed, and I think you've changed along with it. And what do you believe is the right amount of marketing? Do you think that is fallen behind, or you think that a writer needs to market himself or herself?
I think writers need to market themselves, especially so. It's not easy. So publishers have a lot of writers, so they are not going to excessively focus on you unless you're a big celebrity, unless you have a very compelling story or something that they know is a surefire hit. No one can say what is going to be a
No
surefire hit
one can
anyhow.
say exactly.
So marketing is something that writers can't shy away from today. They have to be a part of it. But I also feel again that you need to strike that balance where you can't be so in your face with everyone constantly, like you can't tell people constantly, like, buy my book, buy my book. People are going to hate you after that. The moment they see
Yeah,
you come somewhere, they'll run in the opposite direction. This person started, whether it's in reality or online, they're just going to hate you if you do that.
right.
So you have to strike that tasteful balance where you know that you are selling your book, but you're not selling yourself, and you have to figure out how to make sure that you come out of this still with a few friends left. So
Yeah,
it's a tough situation, because
right.
writers, ideally what we want to do is to be left alone to do our writing. We don't want to be all this, but then everything comes with its set of, like, expectations. So when you're signing the contract itself with the publisher, there is a certain stipulation about marketing, about appearing for book launches and all that. When you're self-publishing, you have to do whatever you can. So we,
To push it,
because
yes.
social media is free, we use social
Yes.
media. So Instagram lives where we talk or take questions from readers. So it's interacting with readers, building that, it has to happen over time. Building a community of readers who want to know what you're working on next. It takes time. Nothing happens overnight. There is no such
Yeah.
thing as an overnight success, because that
Nothing at
overnight
all.
success has taken a long time to happen. So, you know,
Like they say, the
uh,
cliche is it usually takes 10 years. Yeah.
yeah. So you have to build that community of readers. You have to be invested in it. You have to know that I am not writing this one book and not writing anything else for another 2 years. Then I mean, of course, you can go ahead and do that, but it will be very difficult to survive in the
Right.
self-publishing landscape, especially because here it's like if you're out of sight, you're out of mind. So
Great. Thank you, Andaleeb. Anything that you'd
thank
like to
you.
say to wrap up? Because
No, this
really
was
enjoyed
great.
this 1 hour. Because though we haven't spoken about your books, I think you've narrated your journey and
Yeah.
whatever you went through in such lucid
Thank
detail.
you. I brought in something about my books anyhow. So I talked about, like
Yeah.
especially Jason Villa because it's recently released and all that. So I
Right.
hope your
Right.
viewers will pick it up because it's a very nice 3 book series. So I
Great.
think this was great. I enjoyed talking to you, Venu. It was great. I
Wonderful.
hope that you were able to, since we didn't specifically talk about my first job as such, because
Yeah. Yeah.
even though I did have a
No,
job,
but
I
I
think
think it's
writing
a
has always
continuum,
been
and
like a
yeah,
job. Yeah,
great. Thank you, Andaleeb, for coming on the show, and it's been
thank you,
a real pleasure.
thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. That was Andaleeb Wajid, and next week we'll have another job, another career journey, and more stories about how people have defined their lives. Thank you for joining us, and join us again next week.